Three, two, one. So, as you were talking in your groups, were there themes that came up or conversations that were enlightening or things that you kind of thought about as you were having that conversation? Anyone?
Well, we noticed that, especially with friends or with family and parents and family, that they had some negative experiences with people groups. For instance, my mom's family grew up near a reservation, and so they based their prejudice on their life experience, and then they extrapolated that to the whole people group. And free to talk about it, because I'm older, so there was no politically correct concept in place. So they were free to talk about that Indians were just bad because they were lazy. That's what I grew up hearing. And they based it on their personal experience, their small group of whoever they came into contact with. So they felt perfectly free making that assumption. Because in their experience, it was true.
Okay.
So that's what they passed on.
It was the same with, we had talked about the same thing, where I grew up near a fairly large Mexican immigration area. The Latin Americans as a whole within my family got pretty bad raps because my dad was a renter, and it just so happened that he got some bad Mexican renters at one point, and from there on out it was, kind of similar.
Okay, so their personal interactions really, limited personal interactions, really painted or tainted their view on people groups, and they tried to pass that on.
Yeah, I don't think they purposely set out to do it, but they certainly didn't purposely not set out to do it. It's just part of their, part of their views.
All right. Yes.
That it's just, we were talking about, Stu and I grew up in Green Bay, which was white, except for Packer players. This was a long time ago. And so what I heard was, being from my dad's family was all German, I heard bad things about English. I heard bad things. So when I think about that, I was just hearing about other Europeans because they'd had bad experiences with them. And so there were no other racial groups, but there were other nationalities, I guess. And so there was that kind of talk about different nationalities.
Yeah. Kind of that Dr. Seuss Starbelly Sneetches kind of thing, right? Anyone, you guys read that, right? If you haven't, check it out. It's Dr. Seuss Starbelly Sneetches. We have stars upon thars and all that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. Yes.
What I noticed was like the significance of the absence of stereotypes. That like, at least in my life experiences, Asian Americans, I don't really have an idea about them because we didn't talk about them very much, and Native Americans didn't talk about them at all.
Okay.
And
so the absence was pretty vocal, right? So what we don't talk about is as equally important as what we do talk about.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Cool. Other folks? Yes.
I was talking about with my group about, especially with African Americans, the picture that we get from the media and how it really differed from my own personal experience. And you grow up seeing this picture of African Americans in the inner city schools and like the gang violence and how they were always the kids who needed the most help and were always really troubled people. And then in my own experience, I had African American friends and known people, and I've never had any negative experiences of my own, but I still have that weird dissonance with the media picture that I've been given my whole life. And so I was kind of looking at those two rows and seeing the differences there between the media and my own personal experiences.
Yeah. Did anyone see differences worth noting, at least even to yourself, between your personal experiences and all those other things, those other groups that tried to give you information about that? Any distinctions that folks saw personally? In that? Okay. Cool. Yes.
One of the main distinctions is when it's personal, you take out those classifications. Like my personal experiences, I just saw them as like Jason, or like the person versus as a class. the person.
Okay. So sometimes those distinctions just disappear. Go ahead, Mindy.
Well, this is just like a funny story about children, and I guess like personal experience versus like what you know. But my mom was telling me a story about when I was younger, and I was with my white friend, and we were sitting there, we were watching some TV show with a black little girl. My white friend was like, "I have always wanted a black friend," and my mom's like, "Mindy's black." And she's like, "No, she's not." And it's just like, well, yeah, but it's just like you see different things and you experience. And it's just like, what? Like, confusing. It's just...
Yeah, no. The whole thing is confusing, right? Because when we talk with with our little kids, they say, well, that person is brown, or she's orange, or she's green. But they're not talking about their skin color. They're talking about what the person's wearing, right? Or so their whole concept of color. And so we have to mature them by separating their body from their spirit so they know exactly how to be. Right? Here's an interesting factoid about me. I was not always black. I'm not suffering from a reverse Michael Jackson, and that's not what's happening, right? But when I was born, long story, it's 9 months long, I'll just shorten it to a couple of minutes. So when I was born, October 30th, 3:52 in the afternoon, my mom is going for it, right? And the doctor's in there, and the doctor catches me. And back in the 70s, they had some interesting customs back in the 70s. And so the doctor captured me from my mom and is holding me, and then he slaps me. And I do what any self-respecting man would do if you get slapped. So I slapped the doctor back. That's an old Richard Pryor joke. It's the only one I can tell. All right. So the doctor hands me to the nurse. The nurse puts me on the scale. She's taking my vitals, how much I weigh, how long I am. And then she gets to her checklist, and she gets to the most profound part of her checklist. And it's called race. And she looks at her checklist. She looks at me. She looks at my parents. She looks at her checklist. She looks at me. She looks at my parents. And then she makes her decision. Back in the 70s, there were 3 choices that she had. Black, white, or other. So what decision do you think she made? Black. Now, the interesting thing about that is this simple question. Before she made a distinction, what was I? I was human. You see, in this country, I'm black. But if I was born in the Dominican Republic, what would I be if I came to the United States? I'd be Hispanic, which is another category on the HR forms. Because, I'd be Hispanic black. But you can be Hispanic non-black, and then Hispanic non-white, and Hispanic... it's just so confusing, right? So we'll spend some time talking about that as well. But point being, I was born human, but the society that I lived in had to give me a designation so they would know how to deal with people like me. Or they thought they knew how to deal with people like me. I've been tricking them ever since I was born. Right? All right, anything else that came up in your conversations? Yes.
The 2 most identical lines I were is my personal experiences with friends.
Okay.
The people who I come and talk to most with and keep company with.
And those are typically people that you choose, right? Yeah. So it would be an extension of your personal explorations, right? I will say that I have. I say this in jest and I'm serious, but I am low on my Hmong friends. See, I have a chart of all the people all the friends that I want to have, and my Hmong list is a little bit low. So if you have any, okay, you can be my Hmong friend. Okay, cool. Right? Now, I mean that jokingly, and one person got mad at me. She said, you can't decide what kind of list of friends you have. That's wrong. I said, no, in jest I say that, but in all seriousness, I'm very focused on the kind of people that I want to have in my life. And if I have everybody in my life that looks and thinks and acts just like me, that's the most narcissistic thing I can do. I'm not examining the breadth of the human experience if everybody thinks and acts just like me. I was at a training and a woman said, well, I have little kids, and how do I have this diversity conversation with my little kids? And I said, you don't. You don't have conversations about diversity with little kids. What do little kids need to know? The golden rule. Right? He who makes the goal makes the rules. No, I'm just teasing. That's my dad's golden rule. Right? No, do unto others as you'd have them to do unto you. That is their diversity training. And then I asked her the trick question. I said, well, you want your kids to explore this diversity stuff and have these diversity experiences. Where do you guys go eat? What movies do you go see? What plays do you go to? What community activities do you participate in? Who do you have at your dinner table that doesn't look like you? Whose dinner table do you go to that doesn't look like you? And I said, you can talk all day, but your kids hear what you say, but they see what you do. They see what you do. Now, so some of us will say that, I came from an environment where there just wasn't a lot of minorities, or there weren't people that were different from me. And I want to tell you that it is not your fault. It's not your fault what people tried to teach you, didn't teach you, what media said or didn't say. That is not your fault. How many people drive a car or have ever ridden in a vehicle? Right? Does that vehicle have a blind spot? Yeah, typically where are the blind spots? Okay, so here, where else? Okay, so over here, where else? Under it, okay. And if you drive a Hummer, the whole thing is a blind spot. Right? Is that blind spot your fault?
Well, you did buy the car.
Is it your... Okay, well, I'll ask you like this. Were you on the design team for the car that you drive? No, it is not your fault. Now, when you rent a rental car, are the blind spots on that rental car exactly the same as the car that you drive if it's not the same model? No. But when you sign that piece of paper, you take accountability for the blind spots on a car that's not even yours. What are the two ways you can find out about blind spots? You can hit something, boom, oh man, I didn't even see that. Or you what? You look for it. And the interesting thing about blind spots is that you have to look for something that you don't know is there, and that's the only way you'll find it. So what it is that you don't know, the exposure that you haven't had, is not your fault. But it is your responsibility. All right? Last concept, and then I'll let you go. We'll come back to some of this other stuff later. Well, actually, let me just hit this real quick, and then we'll quit. What is the difference between equity and equality? Equity and equality. Yes?
For equality, you give everybody the same thing, and for equity, you give them what they need.
You give them what they need. So, for example, how many people have been to a public event and had to use the restroom? Whose line is longer? The women's line is always longer. That's equality. There are 6 men's restrooms and 6 women's restrooms. That's equality. Is that equitable? No. Right? Because women use the restroom a whole lot differently than men do. And so if you don't know about that, I'm not going to go into that. Because I'm still trying to figure out what they do with the little mailbox in there. I don't know. Who's picking up those letters? I don't know. All right, anyway. So when I talk about context and culture, so equity is giving people what they need in the way that they need it. Equality is just saying that everyone has access to this stuff. So, the Titanic. I will always love you.
The wrong
That's
one.
No, what is it?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That was the Bodyguard. I'm sorry. My heart will go on and on. Now, the funniest thing, and I don't know if you've ever watched that music video where she's singing, because she's like going for it, but in the background there's like this dude's body that is pinging off the side of the ship, and he hits the propeller and it starts spinning, and she's going, she's like, ah, you know, a little fake tear right here, ah, and the dude is going, ping, 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 right? So what was it that sank the Titanic? An iceberg, right? And didn't they see the iceberg? Not till it was too late. And was it the part of the iceberg that they saw that caused them the most concern? No, it wasn't, right? So it was the part under the ice, under the water that caused them the most concern. All right? So I'm going to just talk about culture really quick and talk about context. So culture is made up of two parts. The things that you can see and the things that you can't see. I will tell you that my students taught me all the stuff that I'm giving you today. My students taught me. I tried to teach them a different way, and then they taught me that this is the best way to do it. Right? So the stuff that we can see, we call artifacts. The things that we can't see, we will refer to as values. All right? So what are some artifacts or things that you can see about a culture? Give me some examples of things. You know you're in this culture because you can see these things versus being in another culture.
Clothing.
Okay, so clothing. What else? Food. Customs. Technology.
Art.
Family. Art. Language. What else? Symbols. You can see religion, okay? You can see religious artifacts. You can, music.
Hoses.
Poses?
Houses.
Oh, houses, okay? Vogue, yes sir.
Well, depending on where you are, where you work, or what you do with your time, diverse. I mean, you see a lot of different types of people.
Okay. I'll just put types of people.
I mean, you fly to California, you see a lot of Latinos, and
Okay.
up here, there's pockets of all different types of people. So.
Okay. Sweet. That works. I'll take that. All right. So these are all things that you can see. These are artifacts. Now there are things that you can't see. And the things that are under the water are the things that you can only know if you are in relationship with people in that particular culture. For example, brothers, there is a sisterhood of activity that we will never know anything about unless we are connected directly to a sister. Right? And so we'll talk about those values. And so what are some values that cultures have that you might not necessarily know unless you're a part of that culture?
Ideas of beauty.
Yeah, what beauty is. What else?
Work ethics.
Work ethics.
Freedom.
Freedom, the concept of freedom.
Personal space.
Personal space.
Like faux pas.
Faux pas, taboos, right?
What about just right and wrong?
Right and wrong, what right and wrong is.
Gender roles.
Gender roles. children are raised, time, the concept of time, the relationship with nature, traditions, spirituality or relationship with God, or no relationship with a God, life and death. So the meaning of life and the meaning of death.
Free will.
What's that?
Free will. Your ability
Free will.
to control your own life.
Right.
Sexuality.
All right, sexuality. Right? So there are tons more that we can write down in both of those sections, right? So there are these things that we can see and these things that we can't see or that aren't readily available to us unless we're in relationship with those things. Now, here is a secret, or I will hint you to a mystery. I don't know, have you ever experienced a stereotype or thought about a stereotype and you go, but isn't it true? You ever heard a stereotype and you go, well, isn't it kind of true? Right? Anyway, okay, cool. What we typically don't necessarily understand about culture is that the values of a culture are demonstrated through the things that we can see. Right? So, Muslim women who wear a hijab, the headscarf, they don't do that because it's a fashion statement. Right? In the old days, nuns didn't wear their habits because they just thought it was cool. Like the Flying Nun. Most of you are too young to even remember that television show. Right? But it is a statement of their values. And so music is a statement of deeper values. Which is why I get concerned when I see twerking. Right? Because that's a statement of values. Right? But what media does is that it disconnects the values from what we see, and these things become stereotypes. So a sombrero means Mexican, right? I mean, it gets down, basketball, Clippers. No, I was just... Right. So when we disconnect these artifacts from their values, then they become stereotypes. Right? Now, I want you to think about a stereotype about another group of people. A stereotype that you might not necessarily agree with or believe, but that you have heard. Right? These people can jump. These people can't dance. These people are thieves. These people are living off the system. These people are drunks. Right? So think about that stereotype. Now what I want you to do is I want you to take your hands and place them firmly around your family tree. And I want you to shake and see if any of those stereotypes fall out of your family tree. Do you have somebody in your family that's trying to get over on the system? Do you have somebody in your family who's a drunk? Do you have somebody in your family that can't jump? Right? Whatever we can say about another group of people, not only can we say about our group, we can also say about our own family. All right? The last thing I'm going to leave you with is the fact that culture, its only purpose, which is why I get concerned when people do cultural competence training, because that's only part of the solution. Why was the Titanic sunk by an iceberg and not by giant coconuts? How come it wasn't sunk by giant coconuts? They're not in the ocean. Right? What was the context that the Titanic found itself in? It was in icy water. It was in the Arctic Circle where there are icebergs. Right? So, culture is an adaptation to context. And we'll talk more about that next week. We'll drill down to that next week. That people act the way they do because of the context. Which, as a teacher, I'm not so concerned about how my students act if they understand my context. For example, I used to be the pull up your pants police. I was writing tickets all the time. I had my little badge. I made myself a badge. You know, the grown folks, pull up your pants. You know, pull up your pants, right? But I got over that when I figured out that all I have to do is teach my students about the context. Because then they'll know when I go to a job interview, I got to pull my pants up. Because they understand the context. So we'll spend more time talking about that stuff next time. Impact versus intent, just really quick. Impact is what you do. Intent is how we think of or what we feel about what we're doing, right? So you've had a person give you a gift or an apology, and they didn't mean it. They were forced to do it because somebody thought that was going to be an impact. When in fact in our human relations, it's the intent of people's feelings that we really grab our attention. And then we'll talk next time about individual and systemic oppression and how that impacts our classrooms. What I would like for you to do, do most folks have the orange book? No? Yes? No? Okay, they get you the wrong book. Okay. Well, maybe I'll wait a couple of weeks. But at some point, I want to have a discussion about Chapter 2. In Chapter 2, Nick goes through all of the different diversity kind of theories around how to have conversations about social justice. And so what I'd like for us to do at some point is have a conversation about which of those you think might best fit you as a teacher and guide and instructor. All right. So at some point we will do that. You have your groups, so I would encourage you to start working with your groups right away. The Moodle, just double check the Moodle. It should be open, and all of the pieces should be there for you. Trying to think, are there any other questions that folks have? All right. What time are we looking at right now? It's 9 what? 9:17. All right. If all minds are clear, I'll see you next week.